Hello. As you can see, the sun shines before me on this bright new day. It is godliness. Because I just come out of the shower. Everything looks so pretty. Let me tell you something. I had a message. I had a vision. I believe. Let me message my friend. Oh, sun's gone. Well, let me tell you something. I'm not trying to bring up old news. I'm not just trying to say the Nintendo Direct was bad. We know it was bad, but that's not the explanation. I'm here to talk about something much more important in our lives, our livelihood, and the children. Sort of the children. Let me explain. The main problem of Nintendo Direct was that Nintendo perhaps understandably believed that all these farming simulators, that all these RPGs, and not necessarily a problem that it was RPGs from a certain genre, but just RPGs done in such a repetitive way, of this sort of fake SNES appreciation kind of way, like Octopath Traveler and everything, and all on the Switch for that matter. And of course, certain franchises like Xenoblade and Fire Emblem being put on a pedestal. Here's the thing about those. While even Screenwave YouTubers and stuff like that were being honest about how it wasn't good, there are definitely certain YouTubers who I can name who always love certain, I guess, trendy games like Splatoon, Xenoblade, and Fire Emblem. And you see, whether you're like a fan of those games or not, it's not necessarily a matter of whether you like them or not. But what I notice about franchises like Fire Emblem or Xenoblade is that a lot of the people, what kind of irks me is that when somebody says, like, I'm a big Xenoblade fan, I'm a big Fire Emblem fan, I'm ready, I invest my stock and my life in this, no one can understand the genius of my fandom of this shit. I'm not saying they're bad games, although they are not great. I warn you, Harry Potter, of the dangers. But here's the thing about those. Both the Xeno franchise and the Fire Emblem franchise, especially Fire Emblem, started long ago. And both of the earlier generations of them were quite vastly different. You know, with the three different Xeno series there have been, basically they do definitely clearly share ideas, and I feel like maybe Takahashi's trying to repeat some of those ideas that he wasn't able to express as completely or clearly in like Xenogears or Xenosaga. And I think it is very. I think the first Xenoblade Chronicles was quite an accomplishment. But as soon as you get this HD remake of the first, and well, really, we saw it even in Xenoblade Chronicles X a little with the style, but especially Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you see this massive difference in stylistic purpose, mainly in the looks of the characters. Almost as if they brought the graphical level down a notch. Um, I have no problem with like 720p. Well, I think that game's technically 1080p on docked, although it's blurry as hell. And like the game looks so exciting. It's like the kind of game I want to like because of how big it is, but it's just awful in the battle system and the characters and trying to mix this realistic, Cockney accent thing with clearly unrealistic characters. Remaking characters like Shulk they suddenly look like they've aged digressed. The main character looks like Caillou with hair or something. And then Xenoblade 3 is like this pathetic attempt at trying to make it look a little bit more serious, I guess. Um, but the thing that gets me, especially when they advertise so heavily on Xenoblade 3, the DLC, like literally in like the start menu, I think it has like a section in the start menu saying like, here's the 4 DLCs, almost as if like even if you like bought the game and never planned to like connect to the internet, like in the good old days, they're literally expecting you to like complete the fucking start menu basically with DLC, and they're expecting you to be impressed nonetheless by like a new character. Maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here, but in the old South. But like, what does it tell you when somebody says I'm a big Xeno fan, but they're a fan of just like some Moe characters and the style that you get now? Is that really in any way the same as early Xeno? Certainly not very much. And with Fire Emblem, it was even more obvious. Fire Emblem's existed since NES, and it was hard as fuck. You could tell that no Fire Emblem fan, 3DS and on, no Fire Emblem Three Houses player, not many of them anyway, actually take the battle style and treat it like a Tactics Ogre type series where you really care about the battle. Of course, Fire Emblem still existed before Tactics Ogre, but these ridiculous things where Nintendo's like, hey, we ported limited access to the first NES game, and everyone's like, yay. It's like, no, you guys don't fucking care. It's practically a completely different series than the sort of art style and the lack of like Fire Emblem Three Houses, for example, is like it's fun for what it is. Kind of, you don't necessarily play it for the sake of it being serious, but if you analyze like the graphics, like the faces just look like there's barely any detail. The characters look like they have no three dimensionality to them. They're all just like a stereotype. Uh, the music, for some reason, everyone says the music is good. I thought Fire Emblem Awakening had good music. That was, in my opinion. And for God's sakes, the graphical style was way better in Awakening. Just stylizing it for the limits of the 3DS, so much better. And Fire Emblem Three Houses, it's like just every little element when you examine it. It's kind of fun when you blend it all together if you're not looking for a masterpiece. If you're just looking for a bit of fun, it's like watching some porn or something. It's not perfectly satisfying, but hey, it does the job. Um, that is what you could like, but don't. But these people are not at all Fire Emblem fans. I'm not trying to sound like, oh, you're not the Fire Emblem guy if you haven't played every game or whatever, but it's clearly not fandom of the whole Fire Emblem franchise. And same with Xenoblade. It's clearly not fandom of Xenogears or Xenosaga or anything. And like, I suppose Xenosaga was a little bit closer and sort of like hinting on the, hentai style artwork a little bit, but um so when people say like I'm excited for this substanceless new Fire Emblem game, it just seems like what are you even excited for, It's like they sort of started thinking in this way that's not even what Fire Emblem was. Um, they probably could, these impatient people probably couldn't even stand to play like Fire Emblem Path of Radiance or something. It's like, oh, there's no free walking around, yeah, and that's fine. But it's interesting how like for example, I hear that like I haven't played Smash Ultimate, but I hear that like Smash Ultimate had like a lot of Fire Emblem characters. Like, why are you putting so much emphasis on characters that don't even have much like character to them and have such simplistic art styles that aren't even like well drawn in comparison to others? And it's like people have sort of lost this sense of like what they really want, I guess. It's funny, you get some of these YouTubers, like I made a video with this guy, Prosy D, who's known for being the truth guy, who complains about stuff all the time, apparently. He didn't complain a single bit about this Nintendo Direct, which is interesting, which everyone complained about, probably because it had all the shitty Moe uh, stuff, like Xenoblade, that he and his followers like. And Splatoon's another thing. It's like when Splatoon 3 comes out, it's like this thing where some people were just like, oh, we all gotta play Splatoon. It's like, why? Splatoon 2 was the same freaking game as Splatoon 1. Um, uh, and now apparently Nintendo Direct is already getting people excited for DLC in that. It's like, so what, is another level or something? You can play it for free online on Wii U. Unless you really need your 1080p. I mean, okay, I guess to be honest, 1080p does look kind of nice on Splatoon. But it's also bad. And it's like now they're repeating that whole thing they used to have with like the Miiverse with the drawings that you could post, but it's like it's not the same when you don't have the 3DS or the Wii U anymore. Let's be honest, the Wii U gamepad, that was like the one game that actually worked well with the Wii U gamepad. I would say Xenoblade Chronicles X worked pretty well with it too, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the game. Um, but like And the other thing too is like the RPGs. It's like, something like Happy Console Gamers, like, oh, I play RPGs and I was spending so much time playing Octopath Traveler and all this. Like, it almost gives you the impression that the guy like doesn't even appreciate old RPGs. If he thinks he can just slap on all these typical things that don't have any of the same taste in terms of the, I really feel like Octopath Traveler. It's like on 3DS, for example, Square Enix's big thing was Bravely Default, and even though I wasn't a big fan of Bravely Default, at least Bravely Default was more like utilizing the console. It was definitely more unique. Um, they made a whole sequel. I believe that sequel wasn't localized. Bravely Second. Then they make a sequel on Switch, and they also had some other interesting RPGs like The Alliance Alive. It had a nice style. What's so much better on 3DS, and now it's just like we ported the Switch. Yay! It's like no. Why would you want this on Switch? It looks awful. Um, it's like sometimes like I feel like people just don't have an idea of what they really want. And it's like, you can get mad at Nintendo, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just saying, like, I feel like they were just trying to look for what people wanted. It's like, yeah, the community has developed some bad stuff. Um, but that's all, I guess. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to do this to you. Oh yeah, another thing. Like probably the only farming whatever life simulator game that I've ever played that I actually enjoyed was probably the Rune Factory series. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't enjoy any other. I was trying to get into Harvest Moon 64 recently, although I might want to get National N64 to play it properly. But my point is, like, I see they ported Rune Factory 4 to Switch, which is originally a 3DS game. It's like they just have this enlarged background. It's like we add a little bit of detail, but it doesn't really look good. Now, granted, to be fair, if you play the 3DS one, you can still notice a little bit of that image enlargement, but it works better. They have a nice little extra 3D. But like Rune Factory 3, for example, that game's great. I do think that artistically it could have been a little bit better for what it was. But like now they're like we're porting this on Switch 2 in HD. Yay. It's like no, that's bad. That's bad. If you don't have an idea of this shit, like at this point you're gonna port like Hotel Dust to the Switch and try to convince me that it's the same experience as on the DS. Like, are you kidding me? That's why the Phoenix Wright Switch remakes, for example, are so awful. They're horrible, not just in terms of the animation redraws, but in terms of like the menu and stuff like that. It looks awful. Even the original GBA Phoenix Wright wasn't as good as the DS Phoenix Wright, I think, because it didn't have all those little details like the menu and everything that made it what it was. Um, but, you know, not all is lost. I don't think. But don't fucking play Splatoon 3. Why do you need to play Splatoon 3? There's Splatoon 2. There's Splatoon 3, which is Splatoon 1, which is pretty much the same fucking game, unless you really give a shit about your stats or whatever. And even that I got bored of. It's like the only online game I've barely played. Uh, it's like the only online game before that I can at least say that I've actually kind of devoted time to, and I still got bored of it. Because I said splat. So just shut the fuck up. I'm sick of your bullshit. I'm sorry.